So the Rebbe explained that in order to do the Binyan HaMalchus, you have to go all the ways from the top because everything goes back to its original source, and you have to go back. That's what the Rebbe explained in Ois Gimel. In Ois Daled and Hey, the Rebbe brings down another biur why we need to have the Gilui Atzmus on Rosh Hashanah. And over there, the explanation is because we want the Gilui to come down all the ways Lamato Mato, all the ways in Asiya, in this world, in the Daimim and everything. And Memela, it has to come from a place which is higher and higher, which is not defined by this Maila and Mata. But the Rebbe is going to say that level is not really Atzmus. The way the Rebbe just explained that everything has to start from the beginning. So when we say that about Tkiyas Shefer, we have the Gilui Atzmus, over there we're talking about Mamish Atzmus, whereas the Gilui in Atzmus, as explained elsewhere, is talking about just the level of Atzmus, which is higher in Bahafloa from the revelation. We'll look inside, we'll see what the Rebbe explains here. Dalet. Behine, b'mokim achar mevur hatam, elsewhere, it's explained the reason, alzeh, for this shebichdei, sheyiyeh binyan hamalchus, that in order to build, should be the building of malchus, on Rosh Hashanah we built malchus, hu al yidei ha-hamshocha ma'atzmus oida insof. That is through extending from atzmus oida insof. What's the explanation over there? Ki malchus inyono hu gilui. Malchus, if we talk about Malchus of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus is the idea is revelation. The other spheres of Atzilus are the spheres themselves, revealing and revelation. That is Malchus. Malchus is revelation. That's when we talk about Malchus as part of all the spheres of Atzilus. V'gam ha-Malchus she'b'chol sphira. Every sphera is included of the 10 spheres. So each individual sphera, the level of Malchus within the sphera, ha-Malchus she'b'chol sphira, the level of Malchus within the sphera, in Yona, what is Malchus of the sphera? Hu koyach hagilu shel ha-sphera. That's the power of revelation of that sphera. That is what Malchus is. So what's the difference between Malchus as a whole of Atzilus and the Malchus of each Sphira? Elo shehagilui al yidei ha-Malchus de ha-Sphira is hu b'Atzilus. The revelation of Malchus, of Sphiras, of the Sphiras of Atzilus, hu b'Atzilus. Where is it revealed in Atzilus? Ubichdei sheyiyeh. No, so that is what the Malchus went in Atzilus. And it won't come down from the level of Malchus as part of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Over there, the Gilui, the Malchus is only in Atzilus. But ubichdei sheyiyeh hagilui bibiyah, in order for the Hamshocha should be nimshach into Bri Yitzira Sira, who al yidei Malchus kimo shiparzu bifnei atzmei. That's Malchus as a partzuf on its own, a standalone. You have Malchus as it's part of the 10 spheres, and then you have Malchus functions as a standalone, not as part of the 10 spheres, but as a standalone. From that level of Malchus as Bifnei Atzmai, you can mamshich to Bia. Al derech hadibur sheba'odom, similar to the level of dibur by a person. Dibur is an example of for malchus, because malchus u inyan hadibur. Malchus is dibur. That's the same idea of dibur. As we say, malchus peh. Malchus is the mouth. Bidvar melech in other places, but malchus is the level of dibur. Shehu gilui lizilose, which is revealing to outside. When you speak, the other person knows what you want to say. So what's in your inside, how do you express it? Through dibur. Your dibur is a revelation what goes on inside. So in order for the hamshocha to go into biyah, it goes through dibur, it goes through malchus. Malchus is mamshich in biyah. Where are we mamshich in biyah? All the ways, lamata mata, v'inyan binyan ha-malchus sheberesh Hashanah. What is the idea when we're building malchus in Rosh Hashanah? She'agilu yiyeh lo rak b'nivroim debiyah haruchnim. So the revelation is not only in the creations of biyah that are spiritual, elagam b'asiyah gashmis, but also in the physical level of asiyah, where mamshich, there's a gilui of elokus into the physical asiyah gashmis. And within asiyah gashmis, ubazeh atzmoi lamata mata ad behadaimim, and in the physical world itself, all the way till the inanimate. As we say, k'may mitfilas Rosh Hashanah, as we say in the Daim Rosh Hashanah, v'yeda kol pol ke'atu palti, that every act that has been made will recognize that you created him. That means in the gashmis, the kedoimim, kolpol, everything that you made, including the doimim, everything, will recognize that you are the one that made him. Ki'ato pe'alti, that it's the Eberster. Shegam hadoimim sheba'asiya yeda ki'ato pe'alto. So that also the inanimate, which is in Asiya, will know that the Eberster himself has made it. So, this is what the binyan malchus. Now we're explaining why do we need the gilui that comes in order to be mamshichit all the ways betachtonim in doimim. So yeder pol kato be'altoi. It comes through the Sfiras HaMalchus, and in order to get it to come down all the ways, Begashmis, as the Rebbe will explain now, we need to come from the highest level. That's why we need to come from Atzmus Ein Sof. That's the explanation. V'zeu imru lefonei malchius kidei shetamlichuni aleichem chulu b'meh b'shofer. This is, we say malchius, which means make me a melech. Kidei shetamlichuni aleichem chulu, build malchus. But b'meh b'shofer, why do we need a shofar? Because we want to bring it down all the ways begashmi. So we need the gashmi is the shofar as detached from the animal, which is inanimate. It's no longer even a chay, because that's where we want to be mamshich. And in order to be mamshich, there we'll see we need to come from atzmus. From some of the reasons, why isn't it sufficient just by saying malchus? Who is, why do we have to blow the shofar? Because what is the idea of tamlichuna Rosh Hashanah? The malchus, the binyan ha-malchus, to make Hashem king, that is for the gilui to be extending asiyah. So in order to bring it down to asiyah, nasal the tkir shefer b'maisa. So this takes place, this happens through blowing the shofar, which is an action. So that's why an action. And what do we do the action with? How do we do the act of Tkiyas Shofar is by blowing with the shofar of a behema. Nimshach hagilu gam binyonim hagashmim. So then that extends the revelation also into the physical matters. The behema sheba'odam, the behema which is in the person. So that's a behema. That's just it comes from the animal. But we wanted within the person, we wanted to come down also in the daimim, not just in the animal, which is still a living. In order for the gilui to come down so far into the daimim, so then we need that horn of the shofar in which it blows, it should be detached, no longer not connected to the animal. We need it to be a daimim. So here what we explained and what we see is that the goal is to be mamshich, the level of malchus, the tamlichuni aleichem should be, the kopol should be down all the ways into the gashmiyas, and that's why we take act more than just saying lefone malchus. We need maise, and the maise is done with a keren, which is detached from the animal, which is a daimon. Oh, the other place explains, so how do you get it down? Okay, that's the need. That's what we want to accomplish. That's what the binyan HaMalchus on Rosh Hashanah is, that it should come down all the ways in the bottom. How do we get it all the ways to the bottom? So the higher it comes, the lower it can go. So the fact that it goes so low, up till the Daimim Nasiya means that the Hamshocha, the oil is in a very high place. V'hinei, kol shehamshocha hilamata yeser. The more that the Hamshocha is lower, hu al yidei sheshoyresh hamshocha l'mayla yeser. That means that the root of this Hamshocha comes from higher. Okemuva hadugma lozeh mekoyach ha'aflo shebechochma. The example that if it has a higher root, it can go down lower, is brought the example from the power of Aflo of Chokhmah. You have the Chokhmah, the understanding of Chokhmah, and then you have the wondrous of the Chokhmah, the higher, the aloof, the when you really get more than just the Chokhmah, but you get the Haflo of Chokhmah, you can bring it down even lower. That means that the lower it can come down is because it comes from a higher place. So it's brought down the dogma from a koyach haflo shebechokhma. Shahayirida he kifi oifen haflo, that the descent is according to how high, how wondrous, how above seichel it is. That is how much you can bring it down, or the height of the seichel, the wonders of the seichel. In order to bring down the seichel into the lower levels, and to dress it up in the moshul. And we're not just talking about moshul. It should be an accurate moshul. How could one bring down a seichel into a moshul? He needs to have a grasp of the haflo of the seichel. Who davke ksheyedes etzem ha'inyan is davke when he knows the essence of the idea, not just the chokhmah, but he knows the essence of it. So when you know it better, the essence, it can come down lower, it can get dressed up in a moshul. And the Rebbe wants to explain now why in the Maimer of the Friedike Rebbe, he brings this moshul when he wants to describe that a higher level needs to come down to the lower level, he uses the mashal. That how could it come down in a mashal? Because it comes from a higher level. But in truth, there's another example for that. B'chlal, we say for the Rav, for a teacher, to teach the students, so the Rav has to be mitzamtzem the seichel. In order for the seichel of the Rav to be mitzamtzem, it also needs to go through the higher level as we'll see inside. So the Rebbe explains now that there's two ways to explain that the higher it is, it can come down lower. Again, we're getting at that in order to bring down the Gilui Alakus all the ways in the Daimim, in this world, it has to come from Atzmos, from higher. But he gives the example of Koyach HaFlo. So Lahoyir Shebekoyach HaYerido, the Seichel Shnei Inyonim. There's two aspects over here. The fact that the teacher is able to teach the student, meaning that the teacher really understands the seichel, so he's able to restrict the flow of his seichel, the idea, so that the Talmud would understand that. So that's just a restriction of the seichel. The second step, that he can give a mashal. That's called blocking, descending the seichel. That's a tzimtzum according to the relative to the understanding of the Talmud, and also that he's able to block the seichel al yidei shemalbishin b'mashal, by dressing up a mashal. So v'gam b'chdei litzamtzem es haseichel tzarich likoyach elyon yosef. So it's not only for a mashal that you need this higher power, the koyach haflo shebechach. Even for the level of the Rav to be restricting the seichel, it's tzamtzem es haseichel, you need the upper power. So why does the Rebbe give the mashal dafke of the mashal which is milin the seichel, totally blocks it, versus bringing it from the idea that the Rav can be restricting the seichel? Yesh leimar, we can say Datam shemevi b'hamaimer inyan hayirida, the slapshus b'moshul, who the reason that the maimer brings down the descent that it can dress of a moshul is ki medaber kan b'koyach ha'afloa havshota shebechochma. Because here specifically we're talking about the power of hafloa, meaning the undressing of chokhmah, which means the chokhmah has already a tzir, has already a shape, what the chokhmah is. Knowing the higher level of chokhmah, that means hafloa, that means knowing the essence, not as it's not dressed up in the tzir. It's hafshota, the removal of the tzir, which is in chokhmah. So the quite opposite of hafshota is a mashal, because the mashal is the brought it down into bigger levushim, stronger, more levushim, more tzir. And they want to say that dafke, the lack of tzir, hafshota brings down the ultimate levushim, a mashal. Ki meduber kan b'koyach haflo hafshota shebechokma u'be'inyan zeh negeya yoser hayirida the slapshus b'mashal. So in this context, this idea, it's more important that it descends to dress up in a moshel. Dagam she'inyan hislapshus ha'islapshus b'moshel. That although dressing up in moshel, mashenkin, that it seems only by a moshel, it's hislapshus. It's opposite of the idea of aflo, which is hafshota, which is the removal of any tziyur. Haflo does not negate descent restriction, but haflo seems to negate hislapshus and amoshel, which is mile. So although it seems that this should be not able, that it's the opposite. But yet, the fact that you could dress the seichel in a moshel, niker umizgale koyach haflo de chochma, you can tell and you reveal the power of haflo de chochma that it could come down in the moshel. How so? The zeh shehayislapshus b'moshel hu heipech haflo. That his slapshus in the moshel is opposite to the hafshatu to haflo, who kisha haflo, himugederes umitsuyeres ba'atziyur, the lamailo be slapshus b'moshel. That is when the haflo is defined and it is shaped in the shape that it's higher than the slapshus b'moshel. So the shape is not, it's hafshota, but it's still the tziyur that is beyond the slapshus b'moshel, and that's why it's a contradiction to the moshel. Avol mitzad amitis inyan haflo, but because of the true, from the perspective of the true idea of haflo, actually is gam slapshus b'moshel. There can be also a slapshus b'moshel, because it's bichlal, it's not mugdar, not being in a moshel and not a moshel is the same. You can come down from the hafloa into a moshel. The Rebbe is bringing down, this is like a side point over here, to explain the two ways, possible ways to explain how the higher koyach, or in order to come down to lower, you need a higher koyach. So the moshel that the Frierdiker Rebbe used was from the koyach haflo, the hafshote, from chochma, that dafke, then you can come down in the moshel gashmi. And the Rebbe asked, but we can also give the moshel that the Rab is able to descend to the seichel of the Talmud. The Rab needs to have it on a higher level. It needs a higher level. The Rab needs to be at a higher level in order to be able to bring it down to the Talmud. And the Rebbe explains now why the Rebbe doesn't bring down this moshel of the hashpo, the yerida, and he brings the moshel of which is miling when it dressed up in a moshel, because in our case we're trying to say that even though the koyach hafshota is undressed, yet it comes down in Natsir, and you can tell that it comes from a place which is higher than hafshota. That's why it can come down also in levush. So why is it taken not a contradiction? And the answer is because it's not even mugdar in non-levush, and therefore it's not mugdar not levush. And mitzad the etzem in hafshota, it can come down also in the levush. Okay, and eventually we're going to bring this around still to this idea that we're trying to say that in order to have the binyan hamalchus, and the Mamorim speak over there, that in order to have the binyan hamalchus come down all the ways in Yedo Kopol Kalta Pe'alti, that's why it has to come very high. But now the Rebbe is also going to say that actually these two levels, the levels of descending into a motion, which is the koyach haflo, and descending into the seichel, the restriction of the seichel into the seichel of the Talmud, is also similar to the gilui in Atzilus from Malchus, which is Malchus as part of all the Sfiris, and the gilui of Malchus as a standalone, which comes down to Biyah. That is like dressing up in the Moshe. So we can say the Hagilui shal yidei hamalchus k'moy shehu basfiris dezo. The revelation of Malchus as in Sfiris dezo within Atzilus, we're saying Malchus of Atzilus over there, Gilui ba'Atzilus, which is the revelation of Atzilus, who al derech hayirido did tzimtzum. That is similar to a descent of a tzimtzum. V'hagilui shal yidei hamalchus k'moy shepartzu b'fnei atzmai. And the revelation of Malchus as it's a standalone, which is a Gilui Bibiyah, the Gilui in Biyah. We said that Malchus, the Rebbe explained before, we have the Gilui of Malchus as Sfiris, which is only in Atzilus. And then when Malchus is its own standalone, then it's a Gilui in Biyah. Well, Derech HaYiridot is Lapshus B'Msholim. That's similar to the descent dressing up in the Msholim. Oh, so what do we have over there? Umizem move on. Goydel ha'ilui da ha'amshocha shal yodon nase binyan ha'malchus. So, since we're saying that it comes down from such a place in order to come down even into the moshul, so we understand the great elevation of the hamshocha. What happens through which binyan ha'malchus, ubefrat binyan ha'malchus the Rosh Hashanah, especially binyan ha'malchus the Rosh Hashanah, what happens over here? Because it has to come down into the gash, into the moshul, into she'eina mugderes ba'agdora ba'ageder ba'tziur t'lamayla mislapshus. It's not even defined in the definition, the shape that it's not even above islapshus, because it comes down in islapshus. T'lachein ayidei hamshocha. That's why when we get from such a high place, which is not defined in Lamaila Mislapshus, Nimshachu Mislabesh Hagilu Gam Bebiyah. That's the moshul, which is the Gilu Bebiyah. Or Bebiyah Atzmam, Afilu Bedoimim Yatzmam Doimim Shegam HaDoimim Yeda Ke'atapalti. So also the inanimate knows that Hashem is the creator, which means that the Gilui is all the ways into the Doimim, into the lowest of the levels, which means Binyan HaMalchus has to come from a very high place. So the Rebbe brought out this idea that we said earlier, that the Rebbe brought out earlier, that you have the Hamshocha from Tamlichuni, everything goes back, and you have to bring it down. Tamlichuni comes down from Atzmus, and that's the Yivchar Lonu, the level of Bechira, a level of Atzmus. But there's another explanation, that the reason why we need to come from the highest level, we have to come from a place which is not mugdar, even in the gather of higher than higher than higher than islapshus. It's not mugdar. It's not defined by being higher than islapshus, and that's why dafki can come down also be islapshus. And the Rebbe is going to explain that this explanation is not as high level as the level of explanation that we said before, that everything goes back to the beginning, which is really Atzmus itself, versus this is take a level which is higher than his lapshus, than a gather of tziyur, of higher than his lapshus, but still it's not Atzmus itself. So the Rebbe explains now in Hey, that according to this explanation, שהטעם שבכדי שיהיה בניין המלכוס הוא על ידי המשכה מעצמוס אויר אין סוף. That in order to be Milsa Malchus, it's through the Amshacha Atzmus Ein Sofu. So why did we say, why do we need it to come from Atzmus? Because this explanation that we just gave now is that in order for it to come down all the ways to Asiya and to Daimim, and in the way of Islapshus, who al yidei hamshachas koyach mufla, that is through bringing down a power which is above mufla, she'enei mugdar, which is not defined, but still hayerida hagilui de malchus yesh lo yachas lagabe koyach mufla. So this descent, when malchus is revealed, it has some sort of a connection to this koyach mufla. It's not totally. The kibon shaflo shaloyu she'enei mugdar batziyur de lemaila davke. Because what is the haflo is because that it's not defined and it's not shaped that it has to be davke lemailo biyicholta gam lered lamato, and it has the ability to descend. Hadei hayirida lemato gilu haflo shaloi. So the descent below reveals it's a flaw. So that means that there is a relationship. And how do you see this great flaw that it's not defined through the fact that it's descends, and then we see the great flaw that we see within the fact that it can come down lamata. We say to Mizu, and more than that, it's not only that it reveals the hafloa shegilu hashfloa shaloi hugam b'ofen hayirida. It's not just that through a yirida, but how much hafloa is depending on how the descent is. The chol shu mufla yoser b'chol toler lamata yoser. The more it's mufla, the more it's beyond, it can come down lower. So that means that the descent is the testimony, is the expression of its greatness. So there is a yachas over there. Move on. So from this we understand the ma shekosu ba'drushim shemevur bohem biurze, that this Mamorim that give this explanation of that it has to come down low sheberesh Hashanah tzorich liyis hamshocha ma'atzmus ein sof, and they say and the atzmus ein sof, which is not mugdar in lemailo migeda hakavona bazeh hi lahaflo the ein sof she'ein mugdar v'loy lahatzmus mamash. So over there, the intent is the haflo of ein sof, which is not defined, but not atzmus itself, because there is a yachas to the descent. As opposed to the explanation earlier in Siv Gimel. The Hatam Sham Shachas HaMalchus Bereish Hashanah Tzrich Aliyas Ma'atzmus Ein Sof. But then we explained earlier, why do we need it to go Atzmus Ein Sof? Uli Vishaliyas V'Siluk HaMalchus Yibchol HaDarges, because the elevation and the removal of Malchus is on all levels. That's why you need to bring it down from a very high place. The Rebbe explains now that this explanation that we find in the Maimorim, that in order to come down, it has to come from a high place. That's not the highest place. That's not Atzmus in Sof Mamish. That is only higher because he says the revelation of this higher place is in the descent, and you can tell by how much it comes down. So it's not Atzmus in Sof Mamish. Mash enkin to the beer that we learned the Maimer and Ois Gimel, that everything goes up and we have to bring down the Atzmus over there. The Hamshocha is Atzmus Mamish. So this is the one Nekuda that the Rebbe discussed over here. The Rebbe continues now. So here, the question that we need to, we're contemplating, that the Rebbe is asking, is if the Binyan HaMalchus would be for Oilamos, then you can say that a Yid is higher than Olamis, and a Yid through his avodah, Shofar, Imru Lefone Malchius, so the avodah of a Yid brings down so that there should be a binyan ha'olam, binyan ha'malchus for building the world. So while the world lost its chayis, its nostalgic lamaila, a Yid has the koyach to bring it down. But we know that the binyan hamalchus is not just for the world. The binyan hamalchus is for the Yid also. So if the Yid loses his mitzias, this mistalik, binyan hamalchus is mistalik, and also the chayis of the Yid is nostalgic. So how could the Yid who doesn't have the chayis, how could he be mamshich when he's at that point is not existent? How could he bring down his binyan when he himself needs the binyan? The Rebbe will explain that the etzem of a Yid is not nostalgic. The etzem of a Yid, which is mushrash and atzma, stays. When we say that we have to be mamshich, the binyan hamalchus also for the Yid, that's the metzias of the Yid, not the etzem of the Yid. Let's look inside. But it's known there's two areas, two aspects in Rosh Hashanah. As Rosh Hashanah pertains to the world, all creation, and as Rosh Hashanah pertains to the human, to the person. Iker inyan Rosh Hashanah ala b'tishrei, the main idea of Rosh Hashanah, which is the first day b'tishrei, that's Rosh Hashanah. On this day, man was created, so it has to do with man. And in every year on this day, so there is a renewal of this idea. Man is created over again. So there is a creation, a chidush, a renewal for the man, for Adam, who is Atem Kriyim Adam. Specifically for the Yidden, they are called Adam, as the Chazal say. So their renewal is on Rosh Hashanah. That's one area. Then Rosh Hashanah, as it impacts the whole world. The Kivon Sha'adam Hu Tachlis Habriya. Since that man is the ultimate goal of all creation. Lochein B'chol Shana. Therefore, in every year, B'yoyim Briya Sa'adam, on the day that the man was created, Mischadeshes Gam Klolus Habriya. So also general creation is renewed that was created in the 25th day of Elul, but because the person is the goal, so on the day of Rosh Hashanah, everything else is renewed as well. And this is actually, the Rebbe says, the taich of the pasuk of Zayim Tchilas Masecha. These two aspects. This is what the pasuk says, Zayim Tchilas Masecha. The two aspects is the first beginning of your action, al ha'adam. It's the beginning of your action, but it talks about the creation of man, which was done on Rosh Hashanah, on Aleph Tishrei. Why? Why we call it Tchilas Masecha? Because Iker Masecha, that's the main action of Hashem. Shenivra b'yom za'atzmei, he was born on this day. That is Zayim Tchilas Masecha, the human being. V'zikorin l'yom rishon. The remember Yom Rishon Rosh Hashanah, who's zikorin l'yom rishon abriya. That's a remembrance for the first day of creation, Chafei Be'elul, shebay nivra olam, the 25th of Elul, in which the world was created. So we have both in Yonim. So we have in Rosh Hashanah, we have creation of man, renewal, and the renewal of the world. So the fact that in Rosh Hashanah we build Malchus is for both of these aspects. Kinal Siv Gimel, so that through Malchus the worlds will be once again created, renewed, anew. Kinal Siv Gimel. As we said before in Siv Gimel, that we need everything goes up from the world. So that's one. But here we added also by Yidden, the human being. We're building so there can be the creation. We said that, and every Aleph Tishrei is Mechadesh Inyan the B'riyas Ha'adam, that is to create the Neshama B'riyas Ha'adam. And the Neshama is Malchus and Binyan Echad, because creating the Neshamas and creating Malchus, Binyan HaMalchus and Binyan Neshamas is one idea. Kemuvan Gam is Shamalchus Nikras Kresis Yisrael. Also understood from the idea that Malchus is called Knesset Yisrael, so it's really one and the same. So Baal Pizeh. So now that we're needing a renewal, not only in the world, but also for Adam, for Neshamas Yisrael. So Bichdei Lifel Sheyiyeh Binyan HaMalchus. So in order to effect that they should build Malchus, which builds also the Neshamas, so you need to bring and draw it down from a place where there is not only that there is no Metzias of Olamas, there's no Metzias in Neshamas, because we need to be Mechadish the Neshamas. There's no Neshamas. So we got to bring down in the place where there's no Neshamas. So how is a Yid v'tzorich lovin eich shayich shanishamas ayidei avedosim yagil lemokim shelamayla mitziyusam? How is it shayches that neshamas through their service will reach a place which is higher than their existence? Because their existence, how could they pray? How could they bring down something which is higher than their existence? Earlier, the Rebbe asked, how could it be a mitzvah with Malchus? Before that, the Rebbe said there's two aspects of it. There's one aspect of the mitzvah, and then there's one aspect of the essence of the bechira. But here we're saying that the avodah has to accomplish the binyan neshamas. How could a neshama accomplish the binyan when it doesn't exist yet? So the Rebbe says the explanation is that there's take. Not really, neshamas are not, even though they need to be mechadish, is only the metzias, but their essence is there. On the Kudas Abir was it. The fact that when Malchus goes up in the levels which is higher than Malchus, so there is no room, it doesn't take up a place, the shamas the avodah. Neshamas and Malchus are one thing. So if there is no Neshamas and there is no Malchus, because they all went up, so how could a Yid be poil anything to build the Malchus, to build the Neshamas? Hu benegel ametzi is the Neshamas. It's only the entity of Neshamas. But the inyan tamlichuni she Yisrael mevakshu mischanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu shehi melech. But when the idea of become a king, that they didn't ask and beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there should be a king who abitl panimish mitzad etzem haneshama. It's not the metzias the neshama. That's the inner bitl of the essence of the neshama. Shemushreshes ba'atzmus, which is rooted in atzmus. So the Tamluchuni Aleichem is not an avodah with the metzias of the neshama. It's with the neshama of the etzem, which is mushresh and atzmus. Ukeshemizgalis etzem haneshama, himamsheches es ha'atzmus. And when the essence of the neshama is revealed, it brings down the atzmus. So you don't. It's not so much. It's avodah. It's revealed. The essence is revealed through their asking Hashem for Tamlichuni Aleichem. That's the way Malchus is built also. So the Rebbe brought out that even though in Oizvov, that even though the Binyan Malchus is not just for the world, it's also for Neshamas Yisrael. So how is it shaykhs that Neshamas Yisrael through the Avodah should break their own, and has to be mischadish the Neshamas, the Tiltus HaNeshama? How could they do it if they're not in existence then? And the Rebbe said that comes not from the Avodah in the Metzias, it's the Bittul Pnimi Mitzad Etzem HaNeshama, which is Mushush and Atzmus, and which is always there, and that, when it's revealed, it is automatically mamshich the level of atzmus.